Ahead on NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
How does NCBA work in Washington, D.C. to help protect the business climate for cattlemen and women across the country? We're in our nation's capital to learn more about what NCBA does for you.
And now, a special edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen with host Kevin Oxner.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kevin Oxner, and we're here in Washington, D.C., across the street from NCBA's office and just down the street from Capitol Hill. Democracy is always under construction, and given the recent elections, there will certainly be some changes inside Congress to accompany the renovations you see happening outside the Capitol. When we talk with producers, one of the things they say is being a member of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association is valuable because of the unified voice NCBA provides right here in Washington, D.C. So today, we're going to spend our time getting insight into the work being done here each and every day on behalf of the beef cattle industry. Whether it's on Capitol Hill, at the USDA, the EPA, or even the White House. We're here now with Colin Woodall, who heads NCBA's Washington, D.C. office. Colin, thanks for coming back to the show.
Oh, good to be with you, Kevin.
We just finished some pretty important midterm elections here, and some massive changes occurred. Tell us what that means to your efforts here in D.C.
Well, this was an extremely important midterm election because this will determine not only what Congress does for the next 2 years, but will have a huge impact on just how successful President Obama is in the last 2 years of his terms. And when it comes to a lot of the issues that we're working on, especially environmental issues, tax reform issues, and immigration, it's going to have a huge impact on just how successful we can be to get things done that help cattle producers.
So what does that mean in terms of some of your key priorities for 2015?
Well, what it means is we're actually going to get some work done by Congress on a lot of our priorities. We've had a lot of great work done by the House of Representatives over the past couple of years, passing things such as a bill that would stop EPA's work on the Waters of the United States rule, passing some tax extenders, and unfortunately they've gone over to the current Senate and they've died. With a new Senate that's Republican controlled, we know that they're going to bring those issues up, they're going to pass them, and then the fight will be between Congress and the President on whether or not we can get those signed into law.
Let's talk about an issue that's received lots of press here lately, and that's cool. Where does cool stand now, Colin?
Country of origin labeling is one of those issues just doesn't seem to want to go away, and we still see that now with what we're dealing with regarding this issue. Just about a couple weeks ago, the World Trade Organization actually came out, and for the third time in a row, they have ruled against the United States on country of origin labeling. So that means that we are in violation of the trade agreements that we have with Canada and Mexico, and unless we fix cool, we're going to have retaliation by both those countries, and they historically have been two of the top 5 markets for the export of U.S. beef. We cannot afford to have them shut down our access there. You know, cool is a lot like prohibition. It may have sounded like a good idea at the time, but when it got put in place, there were a lot of unintended consequences. It just doesn't work, and it needed to be repealed. Cool's the same way. Had some good intentions, but unfortunately the unintended consequences are not working. It's going to really jeopardize our trade agreements, and so we've got to repeal it. We've got to get rid of it.
Help people at home understand what makes cool such a contentious issue and what could be some of the far-reaching impacts.
Well, it's contentious because there's still a lot of people that think that if we put where the beef is from, that the consumer is going to respond to that. They're going to actively seek that out. They're going to pay more money, and it's going to benefit U.S. cattle producers. That was the premise behind country of origin labeling, but unfortunately, after 6 years of implementation, that has not been the result. All it has done is add costs into our system, costs that producers are bearing the burden of, and more importantly, as I said, this jeopardization of our trade relationship with Canada and Mexico is a big problem. We need the access into both those countries.
And cost at a time that meat prices are already, record high, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. Anything that you add on the cost side of things is going to be recognized not only by the producers but also by the consumers. And if the consumers were actually really looking for this, they would have sent some market signals that cool was important. They have not done that.
Yeah. So let's talk about other issues. What else do you see on the horizon for you here in D.C. over the next couple of years?
Well, I think we're going to have a great opportunity to really hem up EPA. They have been running roughshod over us for quite some time now. They have really had the support of the Democrat-controlled Senate and the President. By having the Republicans in control, we know that there's going to be a lot more oversight of what EPA is doing. They'll find themselves hauled up to answer for these issues quite often. And more importantly, as I said, I think we'll actually see some legislation passed that will stop EPA and all of their attacks on our industry, such as the Waters of the United States rule.
Certainly some encouraging news. And what would you tell folks sitting at home? How can they get involved in the activities that you plan to undertake over the next couple of years?
You know, it's really easy. All you have to do is continue watching C2C. We'll put out different calls to action throughout the year. Go to our website, beefusa.org. You'll see an issues center where you can engage on all of these particular items we've talked about and a whole lot more. But the real important thing is just to understand that your voice is important, that you need to engage, and we require that grassroots support in order for us to be successful in Washington, D.C. So make sure you pick up the phone, join NCBA, but more importantly, go to the website and send letters to members of Congress and the administration on all these issues we just talked about.
So last question from a personal standpoint. I know you've been doing this a long time. Your heart and your home's back in Texas. What makes you continue to want to represent cattlemen and cattlewomen right here in Washington, D.C.?
Well, you know, we are truly representing the salt of the earth, and that is America's cattle producers. Those people who are working every day to make sure that we have high-quality beef on the tables from Shanghai to New York City. And to do that, we need to make sure that we can keep the government out of their business. And that's what motivates all of us here in Washington, D.C., is to get up every morning, to fight that fight, to make sure that cattle producers can focus on what they need to be doing, and that is producing that high-quality beef. And we'll do what we can to keep the government just out of your business.
My thanks to you and your entire staff for all you do for us each and every day, Colin.
Thank you, Kevin.
If you'd like to support the work of NCBA in defending and advocating for the cattle industry in Washington, D.C., why not become an NCBA member? It's easy to do. Just call 1-866-USA-BEEF or visit the website beefusa.org. Still ahead on this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll dig deeper into the work NCBA does in Washington to protect against regulatory overreach that could impact cattle-producing families. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
You're watching NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen on RFD TV.
Some call it a come-from-behind victory, an unlikely win, a reversal of fortune. The feeling of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. This is our moment, our victory dance, because we choose confidence. We choose Zuprevo for BRD treatment.
Are you going to do this every time we treat a calf with Zuprevo?
Absolutely.
Well, all right then.
Don't let BRD interfere with his performance. Treat it with Zuprevo and get him back to his home pen. Zuprevo is a fast-acting, long-lasting BRD treatment that you can count on to get the job done. Ask your veterinarian to prescribe Zuprevo. Choose confidence. Choose Zuprevo for Merck Animal Health.
I'm an NCBA member because NCBA, they look at the facts, they look at the history, and they look what's good for the industry.
It's important to be NCBA members just because of what NCBA does. They keep us informed about a lot of things that are going on nationwide.
The reason we're an NCBA member is we think that it's the best voice that the cattle people have.
Join NCBA today. Head to beefusa.org or call 866-USA-BEEF.
We don't sit idle, wondering how we're going to build a better truck. We get out there and walk a mile, thousands of miles, in the footsteps of the guys we build trucks for. The groundbreaking Ram Heavy Duty, with 30,000 pounds of towing and 850 pound-feet of torque.
Welcome back. As cattlemen and women know all too well, the U.S. Congress is not the only place in Washington that can have an impact on our business. From EPA to USDA, federal regulation can also hit the beef cattle industry as well. And joining me now is Christina Butts, Executive Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Washington, D.C. office. Christina, thanks for joining us for a few moments today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You know, you spend a lot of your time and energy and effort focused on regulatory issues as opposed to legislative issues. Help folks understand the difference and why that matters to folks out in the country.
Well, a lot of people are very familiar with the legislative issues, what Congress is working on, what they're voting on, because there's a very strong constituent outreach component of that. But once those legislative bills actually get signed into law, they get kicked over to the regulatory side of our government. And that's really where the devil in the details become very, very important. And so when you start looking at these details, that's when you have to make sure that the congressional intent of what was passed by Congress, the House and the Senate, signed into law by President, remains throughout the regulatory process. So the fight's never over until the very, very bitter end. And the regulatory situation itself has a lot of safeguards in place and a lot of opportunities for constituents as well as industry folks to actually have a voice in that process. So, but that really is kind of a large portion of our time in Washington, is not so much on Capitol Hill, which we do spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill, but also on the regulatory side as well.
So update us, what are some of the regulatory issues you've been focused on lately?
Well, one of the largest regulatory issues that we're working on right now is the EPA's proposed rule on waters of the United States. Yep. Obviously a great opportunity for producers to make sure they're submitting comments to the EPA. We also have a regulatory issue out of the Department of Agriculture, which would allow the fresh and frozen importation of beef from Brazil and Argentina. So two countries that are looking at ways on how they can improve their systems in terms of a disease known as foot and mouth disease that we have a lot of concern over, making sure it's not reintroduced back into our country through the importation of their products. So those are two regulatory issues that we're working on right now. A second one out of USDA is the dietary guidelines. Right. So every 5 years, USDA and the Department of Health and Human Services come together and they start evaluating and reviewing all the latest nutrition research that's available to see if we need to make changes from the 2010 dietary guidelines. And that's what we're working on right now in the 2015 dietary guidelines.
Well, I want to talk to you about that. First question is, update folks a little bit about where do we stand in that evaluation and change process as it relates to the 2015 guidelines.
So we're really kind of coming to the end of the advisory process. And what that means is that over the last several years, nutrition and health influencers have been meeting in Washington and really kind of through webinars. So there's been an opportunity to be involved or at least monitoring the situation and the discussions. And they're tasked with reviewing the latest scientific research that's out there to see if a change should be warranted to change behavior problems or behavior issues for Americans, relating back obviously to a diet. The goal here is a well-balanced diet that Americans could incorporate into a whole host of different lifestyles because we are so diverse here in America. But we're finalizing kind of the end of that position where they've had their sixth and final meeting. December the 15th, they're going to have a more kind of webinar hosted meeting. This is USDA and the Department of Health and Human Services, where they're going to give the committee's recommendations to the secretaries. Gotcha. Then that is going to have a comment period. So that's where NCBA is really going to step up. We are going to review the recommendations this advisory committee is giving to the secretaries. And then obviously science dictates all of our conversations and all of our communication with the agency. And then at some point next year, early next year, we should have the finalized 2015 dietary guidelines. So really it's towards the end of that process.
I've heard a lot, read a lot about speculations about what may or may not be part of those guidelines. Do you care to suggest or provide your input? And more importantly, what impact does it have to cattle producers all across the country?
Well, the dietary guidelines themselves are really kind of the golden pyramid. So they are the foundation of all nutrition policy here in Washington and really throughout the nutrition profession in all of America. So when you start looking at things like the school lunch and breakfast programs, that is all the foundation looking back to the dietary guidelines. Any type of government feeding programs, senior summer feeding programs, and even military feeding programs, they all really have their basis on these dietary guidelines. So it's important that it is a scientific process. It's important that we get the information correct and accurate. And it's important that we do allow an opportunity for comments from the public to be engaged in the process. So it does play a significant role to cattle producers. Obviously, beef is the forefront. We want it to be the center protein there on the plate at all times. But we do want it to be part of a well-balanced diet. And we want to make sure that we're utilizing the latest science to make those recommendations to the agency. We did share caution early on in the process because Obviously, the committee started bringing up other areas of interest, topics like sustainability, talking specifically about the beef industry. We're not afraid to talk about that. We have a great story. We want to share it, want to talk about it. But when you look at the scope of this advisory committee, it's focused on nutrition. So we really think that the committee should stay focused on nutrition, looking at the relevant science, and to lead that as the policy discussion moves forward.
You mentioned, Christina, Waters of the United States, and we heard a lot on that during the summer and early fall. Where does that stand as we move into 2015?
We are hopeful that EPA, and hopefully with cattle producers reaching out throughout the country, will actually pull back their proposed regulation and start over. EPA has been very much so defensive and talking about how ag was not the true intent of the regulation. So our comments are, if we weren't the true intent, scrap it and start over. And maybe start over with agriculture at the table to help them develop something that might actually get to be what their true intentions were, but they're far from that right now with where the proposed rule is.
You know, one of the things that I know you and your team spend a lot of time doing is providing background information to members of Congress that may not be familiar with agriculture and specifically the beef industry. Tell us a little bit about your work there and why that's so important.
Well, we started a new program several years ago when I joined NCBA called Beef 101. And we really bring in cattle producers, researchers, experts, veterinarians from the field to come to Washington and break down some of the industry terms that we're used to talking about, pastures, genetic selection. But someone from a non-science or a non-ag background may not understand what those words mean. But obviously the staff we're talking to, they're very well educated. They're very much so wanting to be of help, but if they don't know our industry, typically they're going to recommend a vote against us. So we've really been focused on those educational efforts. It's been a great success on Capitol Hill. Our producers truly enjoy it when they come to DC and talk about what they do as a cow-calf operator, you know, what it means to be a feed yard manager, you know, the sacrifices that we take for granted. For instance, we don't open up Christmas presents on Christmas morning until after the animals have been taken care of. And those are things that we take for granted as an industry, but people outside of our industry, it's really something they haven't thought about before. But if we can help make it relatable, usually there's better outreach afterwards and there's better follow-up when they're coming to us saying, well, we have this idea. Is that helpful, harmful? You know, what are your thoughts? And it's all about that relationship, and it's really about the dialogue.
Your passion is always evident when we talk. You grew up on a ranch in Texas. What makes you want to trade those ranch lands in Texas for the concrete jungle of Washington, D.C. to do our work every day?
Well, I tell you, some days it's hard because I have two young little girls. So growing up in a Capitol Hill row house, you know, is much different from where I grew up in Texas. But I tell you, I really think agriculture needs advocates in Washington. Nothing this town talks about does not impact agriculture. There's a direct connection, whether it's legislation, whether it's a congressional briefing, whether it's an oversight hearing, whether it's regulations, all have an impact on what we do and our way of life. And I think that we need to find ways to foster more people coming and getting involved in public policy to make sure that we have people with a background and understanding either writing the legislation or being involved in that dialogue. So I feel like it's a great way for me to give back to the industry that gave so much to me and my family. My family's still involved in the business. One day I hope to return home and leave D.C., but not quite ready to do that yet.
Well, we're not ready for you to do that. You're a wonderful advocate for our industry. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Still ahead, we'll learn about the work of the Public Lands Council here in Washington. And we'll hear from the cowboy poet Baxter Black. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Well, I think a rancher has to be a steward of the land. There's nobody else that can take care of land better than a rancher can, because he has to make his living off of it. When we switched over to the Purina products, it was a step in the right direction, and it's really been profitable for us. It just makes that much of a difference.
The difference we see in the cattle is the consistency of their nutrition. They don't go up and down drastically in weight. Every head on this ranch is fed the Purina Superlix 30. If we keep them on that feed, they stay in optimum condition year-round.
The cattle hold their condition a lot better all throughout the whole year. The products they're producing are very much in line with what the rancher needs to be using to be profitable in the future. That's the best thing ever happened to us.
It does make a difference that we can see, day in and day out.
Join the nation's hottest cattle marketers and the nation's hottest cattle convention, the 2015 Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show in sizzling hot San Antonio. Stop by the Superior booth to find out how we top the market in all aspects of livestock marketing. From internet auctions to national television broadcast, we offer it all. Be sure to remember the Alamo and remember Superior Livestock for all your livestock marketing needs.
Hello, I'm Kevin Ochsner, host of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Each week, we travel the country to bring you the latest cattle industry news and information. Check us out at cattlementocattlemen.org or on Facebook and Twitter. Welcome back. We're coming to you from beautiful Washington, D.C. on a sunshiny day, just steps away from the United States Capitol. No doubt, beef exports have been outstanding in recent years, and that's due in part to the work of NCBA in working for trade agreements and the opening of increased U.S. beef exports to Asia and other regions of the world. And joining us now is Kent Backus. He's with the Legislative Affairs team here in Washington, D.C. Kent, thanks for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I know most of your work centers around tax and trade specifically, and so tell us a little bit about that work and some of the key issues you're working on right now.
Well, one of the biggest issues we're working right now is to make sure that all those expired tax provisions get reinstated. Two specific provisions deal with Section 179 expensing and bonus depreciation. We would much rather our producers be able to reinvest in their companies than have to hand over a large check to Uncle Sam.
So you mentioned trade as one of the areas of focus. Tell us about some of the key issues you're working on as it relates to trade.
Well, we're actually working on two trade agreements right now, one with Pacific Rim countries called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and another one with the European continent called the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership.
Wow.
So with TPP, that one's very important for us because you know, Japan is part of TPP as well, and Japan is our largest export market. Last year we sold over $1.5 billion worth of U.S. beef to Japanese consumers. Unfortunately, they had a 38.5% tariff on that product. So TPP would give us an opportunity to not only remove that tariff barrier, but tariff barriers to a lot of the other Pacific Rim countries.
We've also mentioned on Cattlemen before TTIP. Right? So tell our viewers what TTIP is and why that's important to cattle producers here in the United States.
Well, TTIP, or the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, is a potential free trade agreement with Europe that would not only remove high tariff rates on our product, but would also remove a lot of the non-tariff trade barriers. Things such as age-based restrictions and restrictions on a lot of the production technologies that we rely on to produce a safe and efficient product here in the United States.
You know, the last couple of years we've talked a lot about free trade agreements, specifically with countries like Panama and South Korea and so forth. Tell us a little bit more about those.
Well, we're very successful to have 3 free trade agreements enacted with Colombia, Panama, and Korea. With Colombia, we had an 80% tariff on our beef. Wow. With Panama, it was roughly about 35%, and with Korea, it was 40%. Korea is a top 5 export market for U.S. beef. So removing that tariff gives us a competitive advantage over major exporters into that country. Korean consumers love U.S. beef, and we've been able to grow demand for U.S. beef in that market because of that FTA.
And it significantly added value to our beef cattle here in the United States as well.
Exactly. Exports alone accounted for over $300 per head last year. We look forward to another record-breaking year of exports. We want to put more money in producers' pockets.
Absolutely. And I've asked a lot of your teammates this same question. Why is it that you do what you do on a daily basis?
Well, I enjoy who I work for. When I get up every morning, I know that a lot of the people that I'm working for are already up. They've already been up for a few hours. They're working hard to put food on tables, not only here in the U.S., but all over the world. They're hard, honest working people, and I enjoy working for them every day.
And we enjoy having you. Thank you so much, Kent, for all you do.
Thank you.
There are many reasons to become an NCBA member, including some valuable incentives for doing so. You can find out more about NCBA membership by calling 1-866-USA-BEEF or visiting the website. That's beefusa.org. Stay with us. There's more of this special edition of Cattlemen to Cattlemen just ahead.
New Holland is the undisputed leader in hay tools. We give farmers a wide range of innovative equipment that increases efficiency and productivity all year round. Because to us, smart means providing a smooth, clean cut with faster dry down, plug-free conditioning, and superior bale density. And smart means leaving less hay on the field to feed more livestock in less time. That's New Holland Smart. Visit your local New Holland dealer today.
I'm Sheila Carges. This is my husband, Brock. We have two girls, Karina and Jessica. Both girls can pull cattle, doctor, process anything that we need them to do.
Using products that help keep the calves healthy, it helps my parents to be less stressful, it helps them to be at home more, and it helps pay more bills when you don't have to worry about sick cattle.
I'd say 99% of our cattle are high risk.
We've never seen a response due to metaphylaxis like we have with the Draxxin. I think Draxxin has a major role in any operation as far as your viability and your long-term outlook.
And how do you quantify having a peace of mind to take a vacation for a week or leave work early to go watch a basketball game? You can't quantify that.
Important safety information for Draxxin. Draxxin has a pre-slaughter withdrawal time of 18 days. Do not use in dairy cattle 20 months of age or older. Effects on reproductive performance, pregnancy, and lactation have not been determined.
It's the official monthly publication of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. The National Cattlemen is produced exclusively for NCBA members and includes coverage of the news and events affecting our industry. From Capitol Hill to the far side of cattle country, the National Cattlemen provides information NCBA members need. Every issue includes market analysis, feature stories, and practical management tips. Start receiving your copy of The National Cattlemen. Call 866-USA-BEEF or go online to beefusa.org and join today.
Welcome back to this special edition of Cattlemen to Cattlemen as we come to you from our nation's capital. We're learning more about NCBA here in Washington and the work done to protect the freedom to operate for cattle-producing families across the country. And here with me now is Dustin Van Loo. He's the Executive Director of the Public Lands Council. Dustin, thanks for coming to the show and telling us a little bit about PLC.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. Public Lands Council started in 1968 as a way for the cattle producers and sheep producers across the West to focus on access to federal lands. Out West, as you know, about 50% of the land is managed by the federal government. So in order to have viable ranching operations, those cattle ranchers have to band together and sheep producers to ensure that access continues so that they can produce beef and lamb for America and the world.
Absolutely. And for those folks who may live in the eastern half of the country, may not be as familiar with the Public Lands Council, tell folks a little bit more about who the typical member is, and more importantly, why is that so important to the beef industry?
Well, it certainly is a challenge to educate those folks that don't live in the West, where many of us come from and our members operate, because most of the East is privately owned. So talking to them about the public lands, they envision Yellowstone and other parks where they can go recreate and have vacations. But in reality, most of that land out west is arid rangeland, and one of the highest and best and only uses for that land is to graze livestock and create that beef and lamb for our country.
Maybe highlight a few of the key issues that are occurring right now as it relates to those public lands.
Well, we've seen an increase in challenges to ranching in the West, and folks outside of the ag industry and outside of rural America that want to limit access to those public lands and really diminish ranchers' ability to continue ranching out west. So we've been working with Senator Barrasso of Wyoming and Congressman Labrador from Idaho to bring some reform to the grazing permit administration process on Capitol Hill, which would allow the agencies, the Bureau of Land Management and Forest Service, the ability to issue those permits more efficiently and effectively and provide more security to our members so that they can continue to operate into the future.
I was going to ask you, you see so much written and actually on TV about this whole issue. Why is grazing on public land such a contentious issue in America today?
Well, it seems that as people move away from the land or get more generations away from agriculture, they don't understand that livestock grazing really is a benefit to the rangeland, to providing healthy habitats to wildlife species, open space for that wildlife, and really diminishing the impacts of catastrophic wildfire and healthy riparian areas which deliver water to the urban areas. So really educating those folks that are so far removed from the land and agriculture is a challenge, and I think that's what's led to sometimes seeing public opinion go against continued access on federal lands. And something else that we face is there are extreme environmental groups that make it their cause to remove livestock grazing, and they litigate the agencies continuously and actually reap taxpayer dollars for those lawsuits when they prevail in court. So another issue we're working on in DC to shut down so that that taxpayer-funded litigation machine can't continue to take out ranching in the West.
You know, you mentioned wildlife, and I wanted to follow up on one specifically, and that's the sage grouse. We hear a lot about the sage grouse and being listed as an endangered species. Update us on that issue.
So the Fish and Wildlife Service is under a court-ordered deadline to make a listing decision on the greater sage grouse and Gunnison sage grouse in Colorado. The Gunnison this week, and then the greater sage grouse by September of 2015. And why it's such a big deal is because the habitat covers tens of millions of acres across the West. And when wildlife species are listed under the Endangered Species Act, there are huge restrictions that come along with what you can do, not only on the public lands, but also private lands. So that could mean diminished cattle and sheep grazing on the federal lands, but also multiple activities on private land could be curtailed if it's listed as endangered.
So you come here from the western United States. Tell us what makes you get up every day and work so hard to protect and preserve the rights of American ranchers to care for and preserve much of the ground that is currently federal land?
I tell our folks when I go out west that I have one of the easiest jobs and one of the luckiest people in Washington, D.C., being able to represent them and really talk to Capitol Hill and the regulators about issues that I personally agree with. So it's very easy to go in, talk truthfully to them, and tell them why it's so important to protect private property rights and access across the West so that our members can continue into the future and our families can continue producing beef and lamb.
Can't be in the cow business without grass, and thank you so much for protecting much of the land that the U.S. cow herd grazes on.
Thank you, Kevin.
You bet. Now, if you'd like to learn more about how the Public Lands Council defends grazing rights and works alongside NCBA in fighting for the issues that matter for cattle-producing families, just visit the website publiclandscouncil.org. And with me now is Marcy Schloop with the Public Lands Council. Marcy, you're a ranch girl from Wyoming. Tell us a little bit about where you came from and how you got connected with NCBA and the Public Lands Council.
Okay. I was born and raised in Wyoming, and my family owns a small Black Angus cow-calf operation. I grew up in the central part of the state, but we ranched in the northeast corner. Went to college at the University of Wyoming and got my degree in political science. And after graduation, went to work for Senator John Barrasso from Wyoming, first as an intern in his Washington, D.C. office, and then he hired me on full-time on his state staff, where I was exposed to a variety of different issues. But given my background, the issues I really gravitated towards were those surrounding agriculture. Sure. Since Wyoming is a state that's about 43% federal land, I got to deal a lot with issues concerning the U.S. Forest Service and the National Grasslands, as well as the Bureau of Land Management.
Yeah. And so tell us this, what role do public lands ranchers play in Wyoming and other parts of the West, first of all? And secondly, why do you think it's so important to preserve and protect the grazing rights on these public lands?
Well, 40% of the western cattle herd and about 50% of the nation's sheep herd spend some time on public lands. So they have a huge part in the beef industry and the livestock industry in general. We believe that livestock grazing is the highest and best use for those western arid lands that really you can't use for anything else. Right. Grazing is good for the land, it's good for the wildlife populations, and it's good for the economy, because at the end of the day, livestock grazing, that industry is the only industry that is creating wealth out of nothing but rain and sunshine.
Marcy, for some folks maybe from the eastern part of the country that may not be as familiar with public lands, what are some of the challenges that public lands ranchers face right now?
Outside of the issues that nature presents, like drought and wildfire, public lands ranchers have to deal with a barrage of regulatory red tape that they have to cut through on a consistent basis just to continue operating the way that they have in the past. On top of that, special outside interest groups that push their agendas through the courts have a sole mission of eliminating grazing from public lands entirely.
What are some of the primary benefits of being a member of the Public Lands Council?
The benefits are great. One of the best things is that PLC is a member-driven organization, so those members have the ability and the opportunity to come together and pass policies that guide us as staff here in Washington, D.C. As PLC staff, we provide those members a constant presence and voice in Washington, D.C. so that they can continue doing what they do best, and that's managing the land and their operations and providing the best fiber and food for the world and the nation.
And for those people who may be sitting at home now, passionate about the same cause you're passionate about, how can they get involved? What would you tell them?
I think one of the best ways is being involved at any level that they can, whether it's grassroots efforts in their communities or their counties or the state, or submitting comments on important issues that affect their operations. But I think that one of the best things that they can do is to be engaged with their congressional delegation. Nothing matters more to those members of Congress than the voices of their constituents.
Very good. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with us a little bit of your insight.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. To find out how you can help unify the beef cattle industry by becoming an NCBA member, call toll-free 1-866-USA-BEEF or visit the website beefusa.org. Still ahead, we'll visit with the cowboy poet Baxter Black himself. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-oh, ghost riders in the sky.
Mighty fine and a great big western howdy. I'm Ranger Doug.
I'm Too Slim. I'm Woody Paul.
I'm Joey the Cowpolka King.
And we are Riders in the Sky.
And we are dedicated to bringing good beef to hungry people.
You know, it's a special thing to be a part of the beef industry and to call yourself a cowboy.
And part of being a cowboy is working together to get a day's work done.
That's why we're excited that the beef industry is going to cowboy up in San Antonio, Texas for the big 2015 Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show. Yes, it's the biggest and best gathering of cattle folk from every corner of the USA.
And we think it's something you just can't afford to miss if you love being part of the cattle business.
So why not join us in sizzling hot San Antonio?
Find out more at beefusa.org and come on down to San Antonio, because you know
it's the cowboy way.
Ghost riders in the sky.
Here's what producers are saying about Progressive Cattlemen magazine, the beef industry resource.
I probably read more out of that magazine than any of them, and I found it very easy to use the magazine, in particular the center spread.
I just really love Progressive Cattlemen as a magazine and whole, the information you get out of it.
Being able to read experiences from other people and things, tricks of the trades, I guess you could say, and new ways of doing things on our farm.
Subscribe today at progressivecattle.com.
And joining me now is Kate Maher, Director of Member Services for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Kate, we talk a lot of times on the set back in Denver about the importance of what goes on here in D.C. Tell folks a little bit about what NCBA does on members' behalf back here in this city.
Well, being in D.C. is always exciting because here in D.C. is literally where the boots meet the hill is for NCBA members. For an example, just this morning I went with Colin and Christina, two of our D.C. staff, to a meeting at the Senate House Ag Committee. And they had the ear of the Senate Ag Committee staffers and told them exactly what was important to our members and to cattlemen in the U.S. And that's pretty important. I don't think a lot of cattlemen and women realize exactly what kind of decisions are made on their behalf every day. And Colin and Christina and the rest of the staff here, they literally carry our members with them to D.C. every day. Their boots meet the hill with them.
Kate, what are some of the ways that NCBA keeps its members apprised of kind of the inside information? What's going on as it happens here on Capitol Hill?
Well, we do live in the age of technology, and email and social media is the best, most instantaneous way for our members to get information. So please make sure that we have your email address on file with your membership, because it's really important that when we need to mobilize our grassroots army of membership, that we have your email and can do so. But you know what? We're still pretty old-fashioned, I guess, and anytime the members need any information, they can pick up the phone and call the DC office. But really, please stay abreast of the issues, because it's so important to your business at home to make sure that you're involved and you're engaged.
In addition to the policy work that NCBA does for its members, maybe tell folks some of the key benefits and incentives that NCBA has right now on becoming a member.
Absolutely. We offer some really nice incentives to companies that support us and really support our policy work in here in DC. Discounts on John Deere tractors, New Holland equipment, Caterpillar equipment, discounts on Roper and Stetson boots and apparel, Cabela's gift cards, and new members who would join right now can get a bottle of Dectomax Wormer from Zoetis. So really some nice incentives to add back to your operation, pay for your membership, and thank them for their support.
Very good. And one last question, as you're out and amongst cattlemen, oftentimes your travels take you places beyond a city like Washington, D.C. What are you hearing?
A lot of optimism out there right now, of course, with cattle prices, but again, a lot of concern about the involvement in federal government in agriculture. And again, that is just really why membership is so important, because this morning, while Colin and Christina are meeting with the Senate Ag Committee, we need our members in the country producing beef. There's no way for them to be here. That membership supports our staff here in D.C. that can go and talk on their behalf and keeps our issues front and center in a government that is really not so ag friendly. We really need the members in the country to make sure that they're supporting us here to do the work on their behalf.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much for coming to the show, Kate.
Thanks, Kevin.
To find out how you can help unify the beef cattle industry by becoming an NCBA member, call toll-free 1-866-USA-BEEF or visit the website beefusa.org. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This isn't a job, it's a calling. Your hard work helps feed the world. Being linked to those who care for the land is our calling. For more than 175 years, John Deere has been a proud partner of the cattle business. That's why we bring you special NCBA member discounts, so you can get the right equipment, strong, rugged, versatile, and ready to work hard. Talk to your John Deere dealer to learn more about your NCBA member discounts. John Deere, committed to the land, committed to your success.
Got a friend or family member with a case of classic tractor fever? You can help by ordering them the Classic Tractor Fever Farm Deal. This special set includes both the 2015 Classic Farm Tractors calendar and the companion DVD, Uncommon Classics. It's our biggest and best lineup of tractors ever, featuring some unexpected twists on well-known names. That's hours of enjoyment on the wall and on the TV. Hey, you can even order it for yourself. We promise not to tell. Just call 1-800-888-8979 or visit the website, classictractors.com.
Let's face it, you don't think a lot about your trailer hitch. You use it and forget it. We understand. But at B&W, we think about it. Short nights, long hauls, never-ending chores. The unthinkable. We think about it all, so you don't have to. B&W. Trusted.
If you're not using IMI Global's verification programs, you might as well set your money on fire. To give your wieners added value, no program begins without a traceable animal. Then add on BQA and other specialties, and you open up a whole new market for your calves. You might be thinking, the market's so good, why bother? You ever heard of making hay when the sun shines? You got a choice. Get in the game or visit IMIGlobal.com. We have watched the number of people actively involved in production agriculture decline steadily, from 37% in 1900 to 12% in the 50s and to 2% today. You know, I got this ranch from my daddy. He came here after the war. He carved this place out of gristle and blood till every muscle was sore. And I took over in the 80s and married my darling in May. And together we weathered whatever came up. She had what it took to stay. And last winter we finally decided we'd pack up and leave in the spring. Kids are all grown and city folks now, but we never raised them to cling. Oh, sure, I wish they'd have wanted to ranch and carry it on, but they did their part, and I thank them for that. And they chose, and now all of them's gone. Well, this last 30-odd years, we've collected an amazing number of things. Bonnets and bottles and clippings and letters and Dad's old surcingle rings. We spent the winter months sorting. Our hearts would ache or would jump as we looked at our lives and the trinkets we'd saved, and then boxed up or took to the dump. We cried sometimes in the attic. I'm not ashamed of the truth. I love this old ranch that we're leaving. We gave it the strength of our youth. And I love this old woman beside me. She held me and stayed by my side, and when I told her I was thinking about selling, she said, "Honey, I'm here for the ride." Well, these new fellers moving in Monday are nice, and I wish them good luck, but I'd rather be gone, so Ma, get your stuff. I've already gassed up the truck. And looking back over my shoulder at the mailbox, I guess that I know there's a time to be staying and a time to be going. And I reckon it's time that we go. This is Baxter Black from out there.
Thanks, Baxter. We always enjoy your cowboy common sense. I think this city could use just a little bit more of that. Accurate production records are key to being successful in the cattle business. That's why, for more than 30 years, producers have trusted NCBA's Red Book to help them keep better records. The pocket-sized Red Book has more than 100 pages to record calving, breeding, herd health data, and more. To order your 2015 Red Book, just visit the website beefusa.org. There's more Cattlemen to Cattlemen still ahead, so stay with us.
Whether you're feeding cattle, milking cows, or baling hay, the work on your farm is never done, which is why you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Get the efficiency and versatility you need with Case IH. From Farmall compact and utility tractors to balers and mowers, all Case IH equipment is designed with one thing in mind: getting the job done. To learn more, visit caseih.com/livestock.
Join your fellow cattlemen in sizzling hot San Antonio for the 2015 Cattle Industry Annual Convention and NCBA Trade Show. It's the beef industry's biggest convention, and it's great for education, networking, and fun. Plus, you can check out the NCBA Trade Show for the latest technology. It's the 2015 Cattle Industry Annual Convention and NCBA Trade Show in sizzling hot San Antonio, Texas, February 4 through 7. Visit beefusa.org for more.
Hi there, I'm Joey.
And I'm Rory, and welcome to our farm outside Nashville, Tennessee. When we go to work, whether it's on tour or here at home, we wear the West.
That's right. Whether it's that perfect snap shirt or that perfect pair of boots, when you wear Roper, you wear the West.
Learn more about us, Joey and Rory, and about Roper Western Wear at eroper.com.
Telling the truth and being real, and feeding my family a home-cooked meal. That's important to me. That's important to me. And planting the garden and watching it grow.
Registration for Sizzling Hot San Antonio is open now.
Just get in there, get registered, because we want to have a world record-setting annual convention, and I think we're going to get there. The people are going to get together. We're going to highlight a lot of new technologies, a lot of great meetings that are going to happen from education. We have a lot of big issues facing our industry too that could impact our cattlemen's profitability. So it's a time for folks to get together and really communicate, educate, and celebrate the times that we're having in our business. And if you want to learn how to make your business more profitable, how to keep your cattle more healthy, and also just add some tools to your operation in these times, this trade show is the place to be. Not only that, San Antonio is a pretty darn good place to go in the middle of winter.
Get all the information you need about the 2015 Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show. Just visit the website beefusa.org. If you've ever snapped a picture of a sunset on the ranch, then you know why we enjoy seeing the great farm and ranch photos that are sent to us each week. So let's take a look at our latest roundup of legacy photos. Why not send us a favorite photo from your own farm or ranch? It's easy to do. Just visit our website. That's cattlemen2cattlemen.org. Include your farm or ranch name, and you may see your photo on a future edition of Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Well, that wraps up this special edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen from Washington, D.C. Thanks for spending some of your time with us. I'm Kevin Ochsner. We'll see you next time right here on RFD TV.